Hello one and all, Jasper here, and many of you are perfectly aware of my opinions on the first season of Hot D. Wasn't very impressed, even if it did surpass my bare bones level of expectations. Still, obviously like any YouTuber that has a following in the quadruple digits, I think I'm better at most things than other people because of how fantastic I am, and so to show that off, I'm going to do something super fucking easy. Rewrite the first season of House of the Dragon, or really reformat it in a way that will give us the superior story, because what we have is shit, but it can be better. But who knows, maybe I'm about to fuck it all up. I'm sure you all will let me know in the comments below. Anyways, I'll stop wasting time and get right into the nitty gritty. First, you know how for more than half the season we are with the young cast of the show? Yeah, well, we're cutting out most, if not all of that, and not because what we got didn't have any good moments. We did, and there was some amazing scenes, specifically in relations to Viserys. But the sad thing is, as good as some of these moments in the show were, they are sadly wasting time. Look, I love Viv ZT as much as the next guy, but at the end of the day, he is as important to the story as Robert Baratheon was in the original series, except this guy has nearly 4 times as much screen time. Now, we don't have to get rid of all of it, but it needs to be used better for characters that are going to be in the series for more than a single fucking season. And yes, you know exactly who it's going to be. Aegon, Aemon, and Helaena. One of the biggest weaknesses of these characters, especially in the first season, is their lack of scenes and moments with their own father, but also each other, and probably more importantly, with their enemies. We need to have moments like Aegon asking his father why Rhaenyra was his chosen heir and not him. We need scenes of Aemon challenging Daemon to show his desire to surpass him. We need scenes of Aegon and Rhaenyra talking about the topic of inheritance, maybe even reminiscing on if they should have been married to one another, and so much more. Now, you might be wondering where exactly I would start this series, and I feel the birth of Joffrey Velaryon would be the best moment. And to put it into perspective, I'm effectively skipping the first 5 episodes of the show we got. Now that sounds like a lot, and it is. And some of you might say it's too much, but counterpoint. The key information that takes place can be given to the audience through natural dialogue. Now I know in a show it's better to show instead of tell, but if done well enough, I think it can still be engaging. Plus, look at Game of Thrones and how pretty much all of the important shit takes place 15 years ago, that way the audience never sees. I think the same thing can be done for Hot D. This isn't to say this doesn't come with sacrifices. I mentioned before that Viserys would likely suffer the most from this decision, but pretty much all characters that are prominent in the first half of the season suffer. Rhaenyra, Daemon, Kristen, and technically Alicent, though she was so shit that cutting her scenes I think is an improvement. My hope is that the benefit of the secondary characters like the strong bastards, Alicent's kids, and others like Harwin and Leonor will be able to mitigate that. But I think we can still keep aspects from earlier parts of the season and the books despite them taking place earlier in the timeline. For example, I don't see why we can't have the large royal hunting party episode in my new script, with some of the same key moments, in particular Viserys' drunk scene at the campfire. Hell, it would serve the story even better in my version, as it also expands on the events we skipped, informing the audience of what happened and why Viserys named Rhaenyra as his heir. Another example, my entire idea of the first episode. It starts very similar to episode 6, since the show has to reintroduce characters because of the recasting. It does a very good job as a first introduction. Very little, if at all, needs to be changed for the first few scenes of the episode, as we get to see the rocky relationship between the characters, Alicent's bar about Leonor someday getting a son that looks like him, hinting early on that the kids are bastards. It's all great, though I would have Viserys still healthy and the owner of all his appendages. Either way, it's when we see Viserys things really start to change, as he is ecstatic that not only does he have another grandson, but also said grandson happens to be born on the day of the tournament to celebrate his birth. And don't worry, unlike the show, mine will be good and justify the violence and death we see. Before that though, we need to introduce several characters and their relationship to one another. Most importantly in this episode, we need to show Rhaenyra being in a physical relationship with Harwin Strong, Laenor being okay with that because he's gay and boinking his sword and shield Sir Joffrey Lonmouth, and finally Criston and his disgust for Rhaenyra. And I want to go in a little more detail on that, as well the show gives us an answer why he hates her. My version will have two stories. Criston's would be he was led on by Rhaenyra, being given false promises about a life they could have in Essos that she never intended to keep, while Rhaenyra's side of things is that Criston was the instigator, confessing his love to her only to find out she did not share his feelings. It'll be up to the audience to decide who is telling the truth, and maybe at the end of the series it will be revealed who was telling the truth, or more accurately that both misremember what truly happened. Either way, we also get some moments with other characters. Obviously, I want Aegon, Aemond, Helena, Jace, Lucerys. Am I forgetting anyone? No, I don't think so. Obviously, I still want all these characters to have their moments and scenes, but right now, they're very much still secondary characters. They'll have their moments in future episodes. Once we get to the tourney, however, we see Criston Cole jousting and kicking ass, taking out a few no-name knights, followed up by Daemon, who he dispatches much more handily than he does in the show, Harwin later even more so, shattering his collarbone, all while throwing out insults about his sons being bastards, and finally, Joffrey. Before, Laenor actually begs Joffrey to not take part as he fears for his safety after what happened to Harwin, who is more capable. Joffrey refuses, however, and jousts, being unhorsed in the first tilt. Now here is the thing. Joffrey dies, but I don't know which method I prefer. On one hand, I want it to be a freak accident where he is knocked off his horse and lands wrong, dying from the fall as a bit of a hint for a future character. Book readers, if you know, you know. On the other hand, having Criston unhorse him and then it turning into a duel where they trade insults also sounds like a pretty good idea. Joffrey hitting him with being rejected by the princess, and Criston implying if he was jealous that Rhaenyra fucks her husband more than he fucks him. That sort of thing, until a decisive blow to the head kills him. Let me know which you prefer. Either way, because of this, the tourney in a way turns into a funeral. Laenor gives a few words and mentions that since his son was born so recently, he had not been given a name, and so in honor of the man who protected his ass from all intrusions, except his own, his son would be named Joffrey. Most people are not a fan of this. Now, I'm not going to go episode by episode, as I'm not paid enough to do that, but I will go character by character and talk about the changes I've cooked up for them in a rough format, starting with Rhaenyra, and this will probably be the most contentious changes. Believe it or not, I don't hate Rhaenyra in the show, I just get annoyed that her fuck-ups are portrayed as good, and those around her rarely call her out on it, so expect a lot more criticizing of her, especially from the Velaryons. Aside from that, I do want to add a little more black to this character, which makes sense, she's on Team Black after all, and it will be her desire for Daemon, which yes, is not her fault, as she was groomed by the creepy fucker, but it doesn't change that she is going to be kind of a bitch for what she does, which is organize the death of Laenor. Her motivation in the show to send Laenor away is 7 layers of retarded, so giving her a far more selfish and simple motivation ironically fits the story better and is more relatable, because nobody is dumb enough to fake kill their husband, thus risking the loss of support from the second most powerful family in the realm, the Velaryons, to gain the favor of Daemon, who is already supporting you, and fuck right off with that nobody's going to question my claim with you as my husband. That's even worse. Also, while I'm at it, I flirted with the idea, a bit, of keeping Harwin alive longer than the books or show to have Daemon kill him. Now that the opportunity has come where he can be with Rhaenyra, he jumps on it, slaying Harwin himself or with the Dragonfire, which is particularly brutal as I think one could also write a decent relationship between these two, platonically of course, because Daemon was in charge of the Gold Cloaks, Harwin Strong eventually became in charge of the Gold Cloaks as well, so there's some sort of dynamic there. Either way, small bromance that's torn apart by creepy incest love. Though I'm not set on it, I am more than willing to keep his death the same as the books and show. Now, I mentioned already, but time to dive into it a bit more. Corlys not being a limp dick bitch throughout the series. My Corlys actually has a backbone, one that you would expect from the only other house in the Seven Kingdoms to have dragons. He's not going to just accept the disrespect he gets from Rhaenyra and throughout the season. I want the audience to not be sure which side the Velaryons will be until the marriage pact they do. But Corlys wants a bit more. He is ambitious after all, so taking advantage of Rhaenyra's desperation on top of the marriages, he makes her promise that when Jace sits the Iron Throne, he keeps the name Velaryon. That's right, fuckers. It's been almost 3 years since I mentioned this idea, and it's still fucking fire! Alright, next character who's getting a sizable change is Aegon, and it's removing the children fighting pits and rape, or at the very least, have him take a chill pill. I've said it before that I think Game of Thrones' biggest mistake, and I'm not talking about the show, I'm talking about the books, is making Joffrey an irredeemable cunt. And yes, Aegon isn't nearly as bad as Joffrey, debatably, but I still detest him. I mean, our first introduction to him as a teen is him jerking off on a window, and as an adult being woken up and scolded for raping someone. I don't want to get rid of these aspects, but to turn them down. Instead of forcing himself on a woman, have him attempt to seduce a woman, poorly, who because of the risks of refusing a prince's command, goes with it. Or slapping the occasional serving girl's ass, a spoiled, arrogant man who has never heard the word no in his life, with no respect for women, and he's a bit of a perv. Now, you might be watching this video and thinking, what the fuck, man? You're making the black characters morally worse, and now you're tackling Aegon, you want to make him better? You're a biased Team Green stan. First off, yes. But don't worry, I'm not making all the Greens morally better. In fact, in regards to Alicent, I plan on making her quite a bit worse. It is no secret that of all the characters in Hot D, Alicent is by far my most hated, and it's not even close. So obviously my changes to her are going to be the most drastic. And of course it starts by taking the concept of Rhaenyra and Alicent being friends as teenagers and chucking it into a wood chipper with P. Diddy. Since we are starting the series where these characters are all grown up, the friendship edition from the show can safely be removed, and we can instead enjoy a very stern, harsh, and practical Alicent whose sole motivation is to make sure that her son sits on the Iron Throne. And we can give her a bit more sympathy by having her believe without a shadow of a doubt that Rhaenyra would never let him and his brother Aemon live once she has the Iron Throne. Heck, the death of Laenor and Rhaenyra's marriage to Daemon can strengthen her resolve, as even if there is a hint of doubt that Rhaenyra would go through with it, there is none in regards to Daemon. That, I think, covers any of the big massive changes that I would have implemented if I was in charge of the show. But there are, of course, smaller things I would iron out. Jace being anti-bastard, I think, is ridiculous. Keeping Harold Westerling alive serves nothing, so either have him die of old age off-screen or have Kristen kill him at the small council meeting. Getting rid of the god-awful accent that's forced onto Missaria.
The King Solaire once again. Might we drink?
Ooh, maybe add an interesting dynamic where the Greens and Blacks both try to win the support of House Velaryon by arranging marriages. There's a lot you could do with this. That's all the time I have for the day, though, especially because I'm paying the editor by the minute, so I need to wrap this up quick. Let me know what you think of my ideas, and hey, I would love to hear yours. What would you change if you were given the power to write this series? And if you want to see a part 2, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until then, be safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.